Welcome to Beyond Tech, where innovation meets insight. I'm your host, Jackie Slaght. Today, we're diving into a topic that's at the center of nearly every conversation in food, beverage, and CPG modernization. Across the industry, many plants are still running on patchwork, mixed vintage systems, some 15 to 25 years old. That makes it tough to access real-time data, standardize operations, or even integrate new equipment. And as automation, analytics, and AI advance faster than ever, outdated infrastructure shifts from being an inconvenience to becoming a barrier to performance. This episode is a follow-up from our recent live partner session, Simplifying Modernization of the Food and Beverage Operations. We answered a few audience questions during that session, but there were several that we didn't have time for. So we thought, why not bring them here? Joining us from our live panel are Kyle VanDruten, a group engineering manager at eTech Group, and Tom Steffen, a senior solution consultant at Rockwell Automation. Today, we're tackling those additional questions and continuing the conversation about why modernizing your control system isn't just an upgrade, it's the foundation for plant-wide visibility, smarter decisions, modern batch management, stronger cybersecurity, and the future of manufacturing intelligence. We'll talk through what modernization really looks like inside plants, the challenges teams face, and why technology like Rockwell Automation's PlantPAx are becoming the go-to choice for building scalable, unified manufacturing environments. So whether you're dealing with islands of automation, trying to standardize across sites, or just wondering where to begin, this conversation will help you understand what's possible when you bring your operations into the next generation. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right in. So Tom and Kyle, thank you guys for being here today. It's good to see you both again since our live session, but let's just start off pretty basic. Based on what you see in the field, what is the most misunderstood barrier preventing food and beverage plants from modernizing?
Tom, would you like to start or would you like me?
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. So for me, from my perspective, I see a lot of the, call it mixed and vintage automation systems. So outdated technology platforms, outdated services, outdated equipment. So a lot of these individualized aspects of the overall issue affect the ability to truly stay up to date with your software and your technology platforms and your DCS and everything else. So as technology ages, the information becomes less reliable as well. The support structure that you gain from Rockwell and vendors becomes more challenging due to the constraints of how old everything gets. So when you upgrade, you really provide yourself the ability to ensure that you are scalable, maintainable, and easy to support.
Yeah, I guess I have a couple of add-ons to that. I also think that we're now faced with a changing workforce where we need to be able to make it easier for people to come in and use these systems. And I also think as a part of that, that security is becoming a real crucial factor on the plant floor to make sure that, somebody doesn't do something by accident. I'm not always saying it's an intentional thing, but that happens. So security is now becoming a bigger part. Trying to add security to older systems is a very difficult task.
It's definitely a focus that we're seeing, as well as the for not only just operations, but to have the cybersecurity insurance and having that plan in place. I think you guys are both right. That's probably why you're in this industry. So what do you think most manufacturers, they underestimate the strategic value of a unified data model? Do you think they're, don't see the value in it, or are just kind of intimidated on knowing where to begin or kind of how to get to where they want to go?
I think it's kind of a multifold problem. I think individuals have different aspects of what they see as concerns. Holistically, there is probably the learning curve aspect of it, the worry that their engineers, their techs, their operators are already used to the systems they have in place. What is the cost overall in terms of training and the actual upgrade itself? And what benefit is it really going to provide? Rockwell does, frankly, a great job outlining the potential capabilities of utilizing like PlantPAx. So going from your, call it standard stick programming, where each machine is unique, to a modern centralized data structure and overall DCS platform. So they do a great job with that, but also the benefit is, limitless when it comes to what you can do in the future. So again, going back to what Tom was saying, with the resourcing and everything else, the change in the workforce, the change in training, as operators come on, as new technicians come on board, the platform is easier to deal with and easier to manage. So that way it's, overall easier for your operation.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I look at most customers that start to move down this, they're usually going after one of four things. They're either trying to increase production, They're trying to increase yield. They're trying to improve their quality. And I think the big one that they're going to start to look at next is going to be energy or resources being used, from water, air, gas, electric, and steam, because those all affect their bottom lines directly. And so I think without the infrastructure to support that kind of analysis, and that's by having that one data model, it makes it difficult for them to get return on investment when they do these things.
Once again, you guys are probably spot on. When a client or a facility begins modernization, how does the shift the role of the engineers or operators inside the plant?
I think your shift isn't necessarily a shift. It's more of a, adaptation. So your engineers and your technicians are going away from what they're used to in terms of, your standard equipment from a OEM perspective. So if you order one piece of equipment from an OEM, duplicate it out, you're probably going to get the same structure, the same data, everything else. They're used to interfacing with that. Whereas a lot of plants integrate multiple OEM pieces of equipment with different standards, different data, different tagging structures, everything else. And your technicians and your operators learn those individualized systems. Now, when you upgrade to PlantPAx, you get the ability to have a centralized means for tag naming conventions, faceplates on your HMI, PLC structure. Your technicians adapt and life becomes a lot easier. Implementation, maintenance, reliability, like what Tom was saying, the data reporting capabilities, everything becomes more standardized and easier to interact with overall.
Yeah. And the other thing to think about, a lot of times when you have diverse systems across the plant, you don't think about all the other costs you get with those diverse systems. Typically, they're going to have different parts, so you have more spares on stock to keep the plant running. You might have more software contracts because you've got multiple vendors for software, and all those things just add to the overall cost of actually running a system. And so when you can reduce those down to a single vendor, which we love to see happen, you reduce overall cost by taking it to a value of one. You have one control system, you have one set of networks, you have one set of HMI, you have one way of doing coding, and that just improves the efficiency across that enterprise.
Yeah, I can attest to that. Like from just my perspective in a marketing role, when having like the one system to go to manage social, email, all of that is a time saver and less stress and makes it a little bit easier. So I not the same situation, but I definitely understand. You kind of touched on this a little bit before, but what are the cultural challenges that teams face when moving from these siloed systems to a standardized plant-wide control strategy? And I guess in your experience helping a client through that process, were there any, I guess, strategies that someone used that made it a little bit easier for their team to get through that transition period and everybody on the same page?
Holistically, I think the challenge is the change of mindset. So, understanding the benefits of having the DCS structure, again, the faceplates, the naming conventions, the standardized data models, all of that information provided. Once you get behind that, the integration becomes a lot easier. But aspect of why it's hard to change and how we help people understand the benefits of the change and how to change is solely down to our training that we do with plant operations team. So we do that pretty regularly. I know Rockwell does this as well. But when we give them the tools for success, they're able to succeed on their own.
I think the bigger thing is at the upfront start of a project is the collaboration between the teams, because everybody wants their input heard. And I think that's something that's missed a lot of the time is they'll go off and do something and without thinking about how it affects everybody else. And I think if you have some operations, you have some maintenance, you have engineering, and you have management is included in that conversation, they all see the same value and they're all pulling in the same direction. When you exclude a group of those people, you start to get pullings that are pulling you in opposite directions. And that's what really hinders this from being very successful.
Yeah, so really getting all the players involved at the beginning. And yeah, I think that's good advice.
Coordination of your vendors is specifically a challenge when you're working with multiple vendors. And usually, when that case, a lot of them are in Asia, in Europe, and other areas of the world where time zones are different. So coordinating a time that works for an Asian company and a European company and a US based entity are challenging because you're trying to find a time slot that agrees for everybody.
Yes, that is a challenge. Have you seen examples? And I guess I'm I'm pretty confident that you guys have, where modernization unlocked unexpected workforce benefits like an improved training or reduced onboarding complexity, or I guess anything else that comes to mind?
Oh, absolutely. So when you kind of hit the nail on the head with what I was going to say there with the onboarding and the training aspect of it. So your ramp up time for individuals is lower. Your time for your operators to understand the equipment becomes easier, especially when transitioning from one area of the plant to the other. So, your aspect of how your resources function and how they respond to this change is minimal when it comes to already having a solution implemented. When you implement the solution, there's a learning curve, but it's significantly less than with siloed systems.
Yeah. And to go along with that, when customers, we start to make it easier for the operator to control the system and be acknowledged when there's something going on, awareness of what's going on in the system, we make that easier for them. It's like I go into some places and I'll see 600 alarms on a screen, and how is the operator ever going to deal with that? And so if we can help them with things like alarm management and those kind of things up front, that just makes it easier for everybody to maintain and run that system.
One of the things that I've heard, I think in a variety of conversations that I've had both for this podcast and then just talking with people with any tech group is the challenges with the workforce and the tribal knowledge leaving as people retire and leave the workforce. How can having this standardized system of PlantPAx reduce that or help overcome that challenge that some places may be facing?
Let me take that one first. So
Absolutely.
it's a simple thing. Let's say that you have a pump that won't start and you want to know why the pump's not starting. I don't want to have to get a tech there to tell me, hey, this is the bucket's turned off. That information needs to be available to the operator on the screen. So if they can figure out, I forgot to open this one manual valve somewhere and that's why the pump's not starting, then I'm not waiting for a maintenance person to come there, open up a computer, go look at something to figure out that's the problem. Getting that information about how the control is actually working on the screen enables them to be much more efficient at troubleshooting themselves before they need to get extra resources.
Kyle, do you have anything?
Yeah. And
Okay.
from the aspect of what you're talking about, somebody retires, somebody moves on. If you have a DCS and specifically Plant PAX, the idea is that as you're onboarding people, they're already training in that platform. The transition shouldn't be terribly challenging besides call it job specific skills that are unique. So, you know, interacting with your equipment, interacting with your control systems, your HMIs, everything's got to feel sort of the same. And that way you're not getting into the situation where the information is dying with the person that leaves.
That's great. I want to kind of shift back to specifically to Plant PAX. Where do you, I guess, Plant PAX specifically, but then if there's other just for DCSs as a whole, where do you see these systems evolving in the next 3 to 5 years? I know everybody's eager to figure out how to best utilize AI and edge computing, but I guess how are those going to impact the Plant PAX or DCS in general?
I think this is another great
Yeah.
one for
Well, so Kyle keeps talking about this information model. And one of the problems that when we start to deploy systems that want to use agentic AI or some of these other tools that are out there and available to us now, it's 90% of the work is getting the data there to them. Okay. And getting it to them in a form that somebody else can use. Because I'm sure when Kyle and I program, we probably don't call the things the same. What that information model does is make that consistent for everybody across that system. So when they want to know where, this PID loop is at for this particular valve, they just call up the valve ID and all the data about that's available to them. So then they can do any kind of analysis that they want to do. So the model really makes it easy. We call it a knowledge graph that keeps track of all the interrelationships between those things. It makes it easier for people to use that data that aren't, subject matter experts for the actual control system.
Tom. I think you hit the nail on the head there, to be
Yeah.
honest. Whatever analytics software you're using, whether it be Power BI, Grafana, whatever it is, you know, however you're pulling that data, as long as the data is consistent, the interpretation becomes easier as well. So if you're familiar with Power BI, but not necessarily another, analytics software, you're still pulling the data in the same fashion as you would on another system in your plant. It's, consistent.
But I think the important point of the graph is, or the knowledge graph is that you have context that helps you figure out by asset or by area of plant or however you define that architecture, making it easier for somebody in R&D to go look at, hey, when we ran this batch, we saw this happen on these two mixers, but not in that mixer. Why is it different? And if the data is constructed in a way that they can do that easily, for me, they don't have to come and ask me where the data is at. That's what I would prefer not to have to answer 10 times a day.
So one of the other terms and things I've heard talked about in a lot of different areas is predictive analytics. So how does the DCS or PlantPAx help set a facility up to kind of be able to take advantage of predictive analytics?
Well, I'll take that one on too.
All right.
It's going to be back to that information model. So there's things like MPS, mild predictive control, that can sit directly on top of PlantPAx and help me deal with processes that are not very linear, that have multiple PID loops that are interacting with each other. It can run analytics against those loops and tell me, oh, hey, you need to change the PI on loop 5 by this amount and do that automatically to help the plant. And I don't like this word, but become more obedient, because it's adapting to what the current operating conditions are sitting on top. It could also be looking at, let's say, a pump and being able to figure out when that pump is cavitating. Those are all things that predictive maintenance can be done today without having to add in a bunch of sensors, just by using the devices that are already there.
One of the things from our live session, Kyle, I'm gonna set you up for this one, is that you said at the beginning of the session was that the food and beverage industry isn't what did you say? Is it broken, but it's aging? So why do you think so many plants are still running on these older systems despite the maybe frequency or the high cost of downtime for them?
So it, I think it's use case specific, but in what I see historically, it's been the knowledge base of the operations teams. So the individuals that are maintaining these systems, they know this equipment. Like if, there's plants that are still running on PLC 5 hardware, it is what they are used to. It's what they have used forever. And frankly, it's very reliable until it's not. The the uptick in what eTech as a whole is seeing, and I'm sure Rockwell's seeing it too, is these migrations into the Studio 5000 platform and the 1756 series, upgrading from PLC 5s. Doing those conversions has become crucial for a lot of industries, especially with the aging hardware and the end of life aspect of a lot of the aging hardware. Rockwell can't support products forever. The hardware changes, the electrical components change, and as all that happens, people have to get with the times and upgrade. It's a challenge, but the main thing I see is due to the knowledge base of the technicians that are already supporting it.
So kind of back to that tribal knowledge is they know what they know and they're comfortable with it. Probably back to what you guys were saying earlier and the importance of getting all the people involved when you undertake this modernization initiative of having the right people and making sure they feel heard so they don't get lost.
Tom might have a different experience than I do.
Well, that experience is correct, but I also think there's a new thing happening, and that is, as consumers, we're changing how we want to buy their products. And there's a lot, a lot of sugar things and red dyes and things that they're going to need to change over the next few years to be, to help their consumers. And I think that's changing at a faster pace than anybody expected it to do. I had an OEM guy tell me this one time. Think about this. If you go in and look at any convenience store, the number of different ways that you can buy a chip today, potato chips or Cheez-Its or any of those, and see how many variations of that one convenience store will sell. And it's just because customers have different buying preferences now that they, in the old days, it was this or this, and that's all they ever bought. Now they've got, 50 different flavors that they want of a certain product. And so I think that's another thing that's going to force our food and bev customers to really have to start to adapt if they want to stay current in the industry.
Kind of, again, I think we sort of touched on this a little bit before, but within the food and beverage industry specifically, how will the regulatory pressures, especially we've said before on cybersecurity, accelerate the modernization in this sector?
I think there's a lot of aspects to that.
Okay.
Like Tom described a good one there, which is the multitudes of different standards and everything else that the FDA releases and the other regulatory commissions release that, the industry has to comply with. So older hardware that was meant for dosing certain things might need to be changed, might need to be upgraded, might need to be removed. And, you run into these situations where you're, again, forced to upgrade, do whatever it takes, but your compliance becomes your standard moving forward. So, and again, I know there's probably 100 different regulations that can affect the changes that need to be made for a DCS system to be implemented. And Tom might be able to provide some more context than I can too.
Well, the other thing there is if you start to think about where we came from to where we are today, and this is going to date me. When I grew up, we had chart recorders that we put a pen, a wheel in, and then we put ink on the little dopper, and it would tell us what the temperature for the batch was. Well, if you forgot to do that, you didn't have that. That's no longer going to be acceptable. People want that data so they can go back and do comparisons of batch to batch, or if they have a recall, how do they get to that information quickly so that they know, hey, it only affected this one lot. A recall is the worst thing that any food and bev customer ever wants. Doesn't want to have happen because they have to track down where all that product went. And so the faster they can do that, and the data in these systems will enable that to be faster for them.
I would like to continue on what you were saying and talk about some of your experiences in the field. What is the most common aha moment that clients have once they see the impact of a DCS system or standardization in their environment?
For me, broadly, it's the ramp up time. So, you get elevated senior level individuals that might not necessarily be technically as acute as the rest of us, but they have to learn it. They have to understand it. When they come into the training sessions and they sit down, they walk away feeling like, I get it. I didn't understand it before because we had so many different things that we had to learn and understand, but now I get it. I understand what we're trying to do here. I understand how to do it. And, the ramp up time being reduced so dramatically, I think is eye opening and astounding to a lot of people.
I would agree. Just watching, I've been into places where I watched operators, manually make changes all over the place because the control system was never adapted to what they were manufacturing. And once they do that and they say, okay, now it's running and running right, I don't have to do all those things and don't have to follow that. I get more consistency out of what my manufacturing process is. And so I'd say that's the biggest thing they figure out right away.
If you could give a piece of advice to a plant manager who may be nervous about beginning this modernization strategy or journey, what would you tell them?
I would say that they need to develop a team, to not just start as a single group of people. I've seen that fail so many times that I don't really ever want to see that again, because I talked about earlier, the team is the most important part of these upgrade projects. And it's everybody that's involved with that manufacturing cell. It's just not operators, it's not engineers, it's not maintenance. It could even be the sanitation people. If there's something we don't know about how they clean, that can be just as bad to our system as anything else.
That's a great point. That's a great point. I think the big thing I have is don't let the, your hesitations be your block, in the sense of like, it is a hurdle. It is a learning curve. You're going to find almost immediate success. What we talked about in the webinar, there's all the different aspects of how this is going to benefit you long term. Realizing that potential and allowing that to occur is probably the hardest thing to do because of the cost, the upfront costs and everything else. Your life gets easier long term. Just be open to the options that are there and available to you.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. What's one lesson that you've learned the hard way during your career?
You only want one.
If you got more, I'll take them more. I'm always happy to learn.
I guess it's, we used to have a tagline at Rockwell called Listen, Think, Solve. And I think a lot of people miss the listen part of it, and they're not open to other people's opinions. And I think, that's one thing that I've learned in, sitting through God how many meetings. But if you're not listening to what other people are saying, you're not going to get the benefit out of that team. And everybody needs to feel like they're part of the team and they've got a say. And I think the listening part is what a lot of people miss these days, because they're so focused on how do we do this faster? How do we do this faster? Faster is great, but if you don't do it right, that's bad for us. I guess that's the biggest thing
That's a great one.
The biggest thing I've learned, especially in the past, call it 5 years, is, there's the ongoing joke in the industry, especially from an SI perspective. I'm sure Rockwell practices the same thing. There's three different criteria for the way to execute a project: fast, cheap, and good. You can never get all three. And, it's a reality that, if you plan it out and you do it the right way and you get everything good, it's probably not going to be cheap, but it's going to work well and it can be executed efficiently, but the cost is substantial. On the inverse side, if you want something cheap, it's probably going to get done fast and it might not be done as good. So taking the time to actually evaluate everything, like Tom was saying, to lean into that, listening, adjusting, and implementing. It's just, it's a game. I guess another one would be I grew up on the phrase, if not me, who, if not now, when. It's what my dad told me my entire life. And I had to learn the hard way that can't always be the case. You have to rely on your team. You have to learn from your team and allow them to succeed, which helps you to succeed overall.
All right, this is one of my other favorite questions, and I love the answers that I get. But if you could automate one thing in your life, what would it be?
Cleaning and folding of laundry.
Oh my gosh, laundry is mine, and washing dishes, which I know we have a dishwasher, but it does not put them away. So it is still not
Yeah, for me, it's going to be responding to emails. If I could automate that process just a little bit better, I think I'd make more people happy.
that is also a challenge that I face daily. All right, Kyle, I feel like you will do well with this one. Tom, I don't know. You may also, I don't know if you have a 5-year-old in your life, but how would you explain your job to a 5-year-old?
I've had to do that. I think
I was gonna say, I feel like you're right in the middle of explaining your job to a 5-year-old.
my 5-year-old always asks me the question of, Daddy, what do you do? Why do you work so hard? And why do you have to go to work all the time? And what I tell her is, Daddy fixes problems. Daddy makes life easier for other people. And Daddy makes machines that simplify and make easier the lives of the people that are using them and the people that use the stuff that comes out of them. That's how I explain it to a 5-year-old.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate without getting into too much detail because that is where they get lost along the way.
Yeah. I have that question because a lot of people don't understand what I do, and sometimes I don't understand what I do. But I just explain it. I try to help people make things better. That's what my job is to help you get the things you need for your life and making them as efficient as possible.
In the SI field, the other one is I solve problems.
We asked this at some point, right after, I think probably within the first year that I started at eTech Group. We just had like a email question that went out and then we shared the answers on our career page, but this answer was the best and still one of my favorites. They said, I make the tunes that the machines dance to. And I was like, oh, that is a great way to explain it. So yeah, like I said, it's one of my favorite questions to ask. Now, I just have one more question for you guys. Do you have any ideas or what would you like to see us cover on future episodes of Beyond Tech?
I think I highlighted this one a little bit, not on the webinar, but I would like to do another partner session with Rockwell on the independent cart technology systems that they offer and the benefits of those.
I would like to learn more about that because I don't know what that means yet.
Favorite product from Rockwell. I'm familiar with Magna Mover Light, and I'd love to dive into it in more detail with Rockwell.
Yeah. Well, I guess I would add on to that. And for me, it would be autonomous robots. So we have Auto now, which allows you to enable movement of material through a plant without having to have a forklift driver or somebody do it manually. Just makes it easier to keep track of where stuff is at. I guess that would be the one I would have.
Well, that's awesome. Well, will mark both those ideas down and I might be reaching out to you again if we get that episode on the books. But I want to thank you, Tom, for you are officially our first not eTech Group guest on Beyond Tech. So I feel like we should send you a trophy or something. I'll see what we can do. But I want to thank you guys for being here and thank you for the live session. I enjoyed talking to you and learning more. So thank you guys. Hopefully we'll talk soon.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.